Jordan Krause. I'm the president of Youth for Ron Paul on campus. So excited to have you guys here. Thanks for coming. This huge crowd. We'll get to the speech soon, but first I'd like to thank the university for hosting this event and helping me set up. I'd also like to thank Ani, Ed, and Youth for Paul staff for helping me plan this event. I have to deal with a lot of red tape, so them helping me out is just terrific. I hate dealing with red tape. It's great. I'm so grateful for what they did. I'd like to thank my Youth for Ron Paul group. The energy you guys showed this week was just amazing. I couldn't have done this without you guys. You're so terrific. Just thank you so much. And finally, I'd like to thank Dr. Ron Paul for himself for making this. You've inspired so many of us, so many people my age, to get active, become politically aware, and even read books on the Federal Reserve. And you've inspired an enthusiasm that no other candidate could even dream of, as you just heard. You've done this with your consistency, your willingness to stand on principle even when it's unpopular, and most importantly, with your message of individual liberty. That is why I'm so honored to welcome you to the University of Wisconsin. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Paul. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. Jordan said if I came over, he had a few friends here to get them all out there. Jordan, you got a lot of friends here. It's great to see so much enthusiasm for the cause of liberty. We certainly need it. We need it in Washington is where we really need it. But there's a lot of things going on in this country, and there's a lot of good things going on. Coming out like this, a young crowd like this, enthusiastic about an issue which is so important, which has been forgotten for many decades, that's a good reason to cheer, and I applaud you for your interest in this very important issue. You know, I get asked a lot of times by the media exactly why are the young people interested in what I've been talking about. I said, well, there's a couple reasons. One is that they're getting a bad deal. You're inheriting a mess. You have a big debt to deal with. You have perpetual wars that never seem to end. But for various reasons, the Federal Reserve is an issue, personal liberty is an issue, the ongoing wars, and also this deficit, and it's a lot of problems. And I think it came together about 4 or 5 years ago when it was recognized with the financial crisis how serious this was. But also, we're winning these arguments. We're winning these arguments certainly on the Federal Reserve. Just think, you know, it's been around for 100 years, and this is the first time we've had a serious debate about whether it even should exist. Last year, we actually, got a Federal Reserve audit passed in the House. We got a partial audit passed. And this is a reflection of people like you who have gotten to your congressmen and the congresswomen and say, hey, look, why don't you support this? So the majority is switching and changing. But even on the war issue, this is one where we're winning too. It's been neglected for so long, but now 69% of the American people say enough is enough. Get out of Afghanistan. Bring They ask questions. Why are we having trouble paying our bills? Why are we having trouble, with taking care of people's medical problems and our educational system? In the last 10 years, we have increased our national debt by $4 trillion for fighting wars that are undeclared, make no sense, and are unwritten. And it wouldn't be too difficult to figure out the solution to this. What if we just have a daydream for a minute? What if we had only people in Washington who actually read the Constitution and would obey the Constitution? Under those circumstances, we wouldn't have had a war since World War II. I mean, we would be a very wealthy nation. We'd probably have a lot more friends, too. Unfortunately, the foreign policy you're inheriting, and I hope we do see these changes, is one where our country goes and we have this belief that we have this responsibility to be the policeman of the world. And we go to the various dictators and we say, if you'll be our pet dictator, we're going to give you billions of dollars. But if you don't, we're going to give you a lot of bombs on your country and we're going to kill your people. What a choice. What about a choice of talking to people, being friends with people, and trade with people, and forget about this whole thing about it's been going on for 100 years. It actually started with Woodrow Wilson, that we had this obligation to spread our excellence around the world because we're supposed to be an exceptional nation. In many ways we are. But how do you prove that you're an exceptional nation by bombing people when they haven't even attacked us? That's not very exceptional. But our qualities that we have and that we're losing and we need to restore, I mean, if we truly protected civil liberties, if we truly had a sound monetary system and we knew how to provide the conditions for a free market economy and sound money and a foreign policy of friendship and trade, I mean, if we'd set an example, wouldn't this be a better way to spread our message through others who would want to emulate what we're doing if we set a good standard for the rest of the world? I often think about what happened in the 1960s because that was when I had finished medical school and I was drafted during the Cuban crisis. And not only was there the Cuban crisis, there was also the Vietnam War going on. Well, the French were over there for 10 years. We went there 10 years. We lost 60,000 personnel. We spent a lot of money, which ushered in a decade of the 70s of a very bad economic climate. But finally, when we leave, what happened? Was there a domino effect and the whole world became communist? No, communist was a failed system. It fell apart. Right now, the Chinese have become our banker. And now the Vietnamese, we visit there, we trade there, we invest over there, and they come over here. Just think in the time after the war was over, what was achieved in peace that was never achieved in 20 years of a war. There's no way you can expect war to solve our problems. There's another thing that you'll read about, and sometimes you're taught these things, but it's an absolute fallacy that wars end depressions. And we've been taught that, but it's wrong. Wars might employ people and lower the unemployment rate, but what a heck of an employment. Get involved and get shot at and go around shooting people and putting the country further in debt. So, no, wars are not good for the economy. It's always a drain. Just think of it. If you say, well, if you build bombs and weapons and missiles, that'll stimulate the economy. Yeah, but what do you produce? Bombs and missiles and helicopters that go over and get blown up. It doesn't raise the standard of living of anybody. Just think of that money. If it were spent back here, the standard of living would be raised by the American people. Now, one characteristic of a society that destroys its currency, and believe me, there's been plenty throughout the ages. When you destroy the currency by debasing the currency, printing the money, diluting the metals or whatever, or using a computer, when you debase the currency, you destroy the middle class, and the wealthy get wealthier. There's a transfer of wealth automatically from the middle class and the poor to the wealthy. That is what's happening, and that's why there's a lot of dissent right now, and a lot of people very angry and upset because the middle class is shrinking. It's poorer now than it used to be. We used to have the largest and the richest middle class in the history of the whole world. But today, the wealth that you see that still exists in the middle class is based on debt. So it's a fiction that the wealth is still there. And the middle class now is threatened because of this economic system. So whether you're wasting money overseas, or whether you're debasing the currency, or having the government spend the money instead of the people spend the money, you're going to end up with a mess like this. This is the reason I make a suggestion for my first year in office to cut spending by the government by $1 trillion. What we could do is stop some of these construction works overseas. For instance, one good example of a real wasteful project, we're spending nearly $1 billion building the biggest embassy in the history of the world, the biggest one for us, in Baghdad. We have 17,000. They tell you the war is over in Iraq. Believe me, it isn't. They're going to have 17,000 employees in this embassy, which is going to be about the same size as the embassy in Italy. But what they're going to do is now, to maintain that embassy, they just appropriated another $5 billion. Why don't we spend this money home? Cut the taxes, let you spend it. The government, let me tell you one thing. This is something I'm going to be serious about. Now, I've met a couple bureaucrats and a few politicians in the time I've been in Washington. And let me tell you, they're not smart enough to know how to spend your money. I'll tell you, So when people worry, he's going to cut $1 trillion out of the budget. No, we're not cutting $1 trillion out of the spending. We're just transferring the responsibility of the spending to the people rather than the government. We've embarked on these problems for 100 years. This is when we got careless, especially that Woodrow Wilson era. That was a bad era. Not only did he come up with this newfangled foreign policy about making the world safe for democracy, he's also the one that introduced this notion, or had passed this notion, of the income tax. Now, the reason the income tax is a vicious tax, it's based on the fact that you endorse the idea that government owns all your income, and the government allows you to keep a certain percentage on their conditions. This is why the founders didn't give us an income tax. In a true republic, when you see the restoration of the republic, you will see the repeal of the 16th Amendment. And also, next year we ought to have a celebration. That Federal Reserve System is going to be 100 years old. So what we should do is have a bill that repeals the Federal Reserve Act on its 100th year. That's a wonderful idea. The Federal Reserve has to be challenged for economic reasons, for moral reasons, as well as constitutional reasons, and also because it causes governments to grow. But the moral reason is very simple. They're the counterfeiters. They counterfeit money. Now, the founders didn't like counterfeiters. They wanted us to have only gold and silver as legal tender. And then they had a Coinage Act of 1792, and they said anybody who counterfeits the currency would get the death penalty. That's how serious they thought it was and how important that was. But they're the counterfeiters. They devalue the currency, and yet they have up until recently been held in very high esteem. But the truth is they create the bubbles, and then that sets the stage for the inevitable bust and the recessions and the depressions. And then they delay the recovery, and this is what we're going through right now. But economically, it's a major problem for the business cycle. But also constitutionally, there's no authority for a central bank. It's not there. And this argument's been going on a long time. Jefferson and Hamilton had the argument. And that would go back and forth. First Hamilton wins, and then Jefferson became president. He got rid of the national bank. It's been going on. It would be neat to have another president one day that got rid of this Federal Reserve Bank. Now, issue indeed is liberty. It means also that the opposite of liberty is big government. The bigger the government is less liberty. It's just automatic that way. So if you think you can have big government and a lot of liberty, it's not the case. But the Federal Reserve enhances the growth of government. So if it's an entitlement system, there's never enough taxes and never enough borrowing, so you have to print the money, and that delays the consequences, and it hides the people who suffer the most. It hides the victims. So it's very tempting. The politicians love it, and they get away with it until there's a major crisis, and we're in the midst of that, and that's why things will have to change.
Only Dr. Paul for president!
Also, the issue of war. Wars cannot be fought without inflation, and that is the printing of money. So if we truly wanted to change our policies, we should do one thing that, even if you can't get all the tax code changed and all the laws changed, you could do one thing to make the point. Get rid of the withholding tax. This is what would happen. If the businessman wasn't required to withhold your tax, he then becomes a tax collector, and of course you then have to participate, and if there's ever a challenge, you're guilty until you're proven innocent. It's totally unconstitutional the way it operates. But what if we as a people had to write a check every month to pay all the bills? We couldn't borrow the money and we couldn't print the money, and paid for the type of government we get. I think that it wouldn't last very long. I think people would rebel and say, I'm not sending you any more money for what I'm not getting from the government. But for politicians, deception is overly tempting, and they yield to the temptation to spend the money. And you have to admit, for a long time, it sort of worked for the favor of the politician, because they can go and promise whatever they want, and they can borrow the money. And we were so wealthy, and we were able to do it for a long time. But things are changed now. The wealth is gone. The control now is on special interests. We don't endorse the principle of liberty and earning and allowed to keep what you earn. What we have endorsed is that the government's responsible for redistribution of wealth and to manage our lives and manage the world. And that is exactly opposite of what a free society is all about. But if we continue to do this, the country will go totally bankrupt. It's technically bankrupt right now, but it will go bankrupt, and that's when you'll see the destruction of the currency. But we're approaching that rather quickly. And if we continue to do this, we'll see more and more power. The argument in Washington, the argument in the campaigns, isn't so much liberty versus big government. Unfortunately, my goal, of course, is to take the position that it should be the contest between liberty and big government. That's what the campaign should be all about. But what is going on, it's a fight over the special interests of one party versus the special interests of the other party, and they're clawing away at a pie that is shrinking. And that's why people are getting very, very nervous, and that's why you should be very concerned, because this is not going to last. I used to talk a whole lot about we have to quit this spending because we don't have the right to put this debt on the next generation. That isn't true, because it's this generation, it's you right now. You're getting ready to get out of school, and you have debt, and the government has debt, and its obligations are endless. It's right now. We're all seeing the consequence of the last 50, 60, 70 years of excessive spending, deficit financing, mischief with the currency, and adapting. You know, I thought it would be so wonderful when the Cold War ended, we'd get a peace dividend. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. The neoconservatives took over, and they decided we had to be the policemen of the world. So to get back to where we were, we of course have to change our foreign policy. We have to look at the Federal Reserve, have a different monetary policy, and we have to further understand how free markets work. This whole idea, I know many people are motivated, and most of the people in Washington are well motivated to take care of people and don't let anybody fall through the cracks. But that's also the same motivation to run your personal life. They say, well, people aren't smart enough to know what they should do with their own habits, so we have to tell them and to regulate their lives, and then we also have to regulate how they spend their money. But they're well motivated because they think that the people won't take care of themselves. This is what motivated the housing bubble. The Federal Reserve, easy credit, people can get a loan, saying this sounds wonderful. Everybody deserves to have a house. Everybody deserves to be free, but not everybody deserves a house at the expense of somebody else. You should have to work for it. But easy credit seemed to be helping. People were getting their houses, and then we had these government programs that forced banks to make bad loans. And they were wondering why this thing was coming about, because it was helping a lot of people. At the same time, they had this tremendous edge. The price of the house, the value of the house was going up and up. So you kept borrowing against this, and they refused. If you look at all the reports of both Greenspan and Bernanke, they never once said that. They reassured everybody, oh, there's no problem at all. There's no housing problem. But what happens? There was a lot of people making some big money on that. We had Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the big banks, and a lot of people making money. But this incentive to help poor people get a house, even though well motivated, was a disaster, because guess what? The bubble burst, and the crisis hit, and people ran back to Washington. I remember in 2008, both presidential candidates ran back to vote for the bailouts. And guess who got bailed out? The very rich who are making all the money in the process. The ones who are they brought about the bankruptcy with the derivatives market, and they get the bailout. And what happened to the middle class? What happened to the people who were supposed to get the house? They lost their jobs and they lost their houses. So the entitlement system doesn't work. You should be entitled to your life. You should be entitled to your liberties, and you ought to be entitled to keep what you earn. Why so often think that we've lost, as a people, we've lost our confidence how the market works, and we've accepted a few notions that I think are completely wrong. One is that too many people accept the idea that the government can protect us against ourselves. You can't do that. I mean, you embark on the worst kind of government. It's the worst authoritarian government. And if you can't take care of yourself economically, then you have to have the nanny state taking care of us. But also, if you can't protect, if the government can protect you against yourself, that means they want to regulate every personal habit that you have. And it is true, when you have total freedom, some people are going to misuse that freedom. And sometimes they're going to do things that you're not going to like. But the whole thing is if you let the government make those decisions, when they make a mistake, they make them all for everybody. In a free society, you make a mistake, you make it for yourself, and you ought to suffer the consequences of it. I think we understand that issue pretty well when it comes to religious beliefs. We can have no religious beliefs, or we can have various religions, and we tolerate that fairly well as intellectual activities. We're allowed to still read books about communism and socialism and all these failed policies, and we don't regulate that. But somewhere along the way, we've come up with this idea that we're allowed to regulate what goes into our souls and into our brains, but we're not allowed to regulate what goes into our body. I think in a free society, you ought to make your decisions what goes into your idea, and I would even allow you to drink raw milk if you wanted to. But the one thing that you're inheriting is a country that thinks they can solve all the problems. If you have a debt problem, you have more debt. If you have a spending problem, you spend more money. If you have a printing press problem, you print more money. But this whole thing, it just doesn't work that way. It makes things worse, and this is why we'll have to make these decisions rather quickly. But in the personal liberty issue, I think this is probably one of the most serious things because it seems to be ignored. after 9/11, which was a horrible day in our history, but I think because there had been a lot of misunderstanding exactly what happened, I don't happen to believe that we were attacked because we're free and prosperous. I don't think that's the case. But anyway, there were a lot of things on the books that they were trying to do. They had been itching to go to war against Iraq. It was their excuse to go to Iraq. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. They had no weapons of mass destruction. So, what other bill did they have floating around? They had been trying to pass it for years. It was called the Patriot Act. You know, that passed rather easily because it was under the circumstances. I had one member of Congress tell me, well, I have to vote for it. And I said, you know what's in it? No, I don't know what's in it. And I said, you know, there's going to be bad stuff in there. He said, yeah, I know that. He says, but how can I vote against the Patriot Act a couple days after 9/11? He said, how am I going to go back home and explain that to my constituents? I said, that's your job. Go home and explain it. But you know, if they would have called that bill "Repeal the Fourth Amendment Act," maybe they wouldn't have had so darn many votes for it. So when we get rid of the Patriot Act, we're going to call the bill "Restore the Fourth Amendment to the American people." But there's a lot more been going on. Not only has it been the Patriot Act, which means that the people who are wanting to search our houses and our internet and all can do it with the people doing the searching can write their own search warrants. You don't have to go to a judge anymore. But it's even gotten worse than that. You know, the National Defense Authorization Act. This is literally saying that the military can come in now and arrest people and have no charges made, no attorney, and can be put in a secret prison indefinitely. That is not American. That's terrible. It has to be repealed. The other day, Obama wrote an executive order. Well, we can do the principle of the executive order as well, too. But I've decided that as a president, the president of constitutional president can repeal all the bad executive orders with another executive order. Now, there's been a Defense Production Act that's been on the books that in time of war, the president can take over everything. The whole economy, can socialize the whole economy and the banking system and everything. But this time it was renewed by executive order just a couple weeks ago, and he added this thing, not in times of war, but he can do it in times of peace as well. You just wonder what the plan is that's going on. But one thing that is good is a lot of people are waking up. There's not enough people awake in Washington, but there are a lot of you are waking up. Not only have you awakened with regard to the Federal Reserve and all, but you know when you heard about Stop Online Piracy Act, guess what? A lot of people called their congressmen. They took those off the docket. They're not even working on them anymore. As bad as it is, it still works. The system can work. It's just that we have been inundated with bad philosophy, bad economic philosophy, and loss of confidence in the true free society. But when the people wake up, it will work. And this is what's so exciting about talking to so many young people across the country. And the enthusiasm isn't just spotty. It's wherever I go, people like you are very interested. You're understanding that there are problems. And it's just not picking and choosing the special interests. It's structural. It's philosophic. This is what has to be changed. You know, we're working hard, at least pretending, in Washington on the budget. But you know, the crisis is not a budgetary crisis. The budget is the symptom of the crisis of us understanding what the role of government ought to be. Yeah, the role of government in foreign policy should not be to be the policeman of the world. And that's what else that has to move. The role of government shouldn't be the nanny state and taking care of everybody from cradle to grave and bankrupting the country and put in programs that don't work. So it's the role of government that has to be addressed, and then the budget comes into place. But it's not technically a budgetary problem, because the tinkering that they do is just unbelievably minor. Today, yes, today we're working on the budget, and the proposal is, on the Republican side, the conservative budget is, to cut proposed increases, but not to cut any spending, just the proposed increases. It actually increases the military spending, because that's a part of the budget you can't cut. But don't worry, they're planning to balance the budget. In 30 years, they're going to balance the budget. So I think the problems are very obvious. I think the crisis is at our doorstep, but the enthusiasm for change is there. It has to be done. It will be done. Even if we don't change things with the Federal Reserve in a calm, deliberate fashion, the system is going to collapse itself, because they end up destroying the money. But we should be very optimistic that we can accomplish this, because the people are responding in a very favorable way. But we also have to change a couple attitudes. So often, I'm sure some of you have been accused of this, that you just want to go back to the Dark Ages. You want to go back to the Dark Ages, back to the Constitution and things like that. back to these Dark Ages. But you know where the Dark Ages are? They endorsed tyranny. That's where the Dark Ages are. That's been around for a long time. Yeah. Freedom is a new idea. Relatively speaking, in history, it's been really tested best in this country, and we've sort of given up on this. So we don't want to go back. What we want to do is pick up the pieces where they were and improve on it. We can have a better gold standard. We can have a better understanding of individual liberty.
Yeah! Woo!
And we certainly can have a better understanding, or at least improve upon, what the founders advised about a foreign policy of non-intervention in friendship and trade. I think, for instance, that we ought to admit that sanctions don't work. Sanctions aren't actually an act of war. So whether it's sanctions against the Iranians or sanctions against Cuba, don't you think it's about time we started talking to the Cubans and going to visit? I mean, the Castros are still living down there, and after 40-some years, they've used us as the scapegoat, blamed us for all the problems. So there's so many things that we can improve upon and pick up the pieces. But bringing with the principles of liberty and this whole idea of freedom is such a wonderful answer to our problems, because everybody should endorse freedom, whether you're left, right, middle, conservatives, or whatever. Because what it does is it invites the answers to our problems, because we do have diversity. We have diversity in religion. So the diversity of how you're going to use your freedom is so important. You know, if you use it one way, but the one thing it takes is tolerance of others. If they do things that you don't like, and you can't say, oh, that's terrible, we have to have a law against that because I don't like what they're doing. As long as you don't hurt other people and mind your own business, it would work. And this in many ways brings coalitions together. It brings left and right together on civil liberties and war, and even on the spending policies. It should bring us all together. In Washington, and even today, lately in the last few weeks, I've been getting a lot of suggestions, a lot of advice from the media and from other people. They keep saying, "When are you going to drop out of this race? When are you going to quit being overly rigid? When are you going to start compromising?" My answer to that is there's been way too much compromising for way too long. Because that's exactly what they do. The leadership of both parties compromise, and they have the same foreign policy, they have the same monetary policy, they have the same spending policies, they have the same entitlement system, and they endorse this whole principle of lobbyists running the show and fighting for their piece of the pie. So what we need really is actually less compromise. We need coalition building. We need to bring people together. I believe our Constitution and the principle of liberty will bring us together. And if we accept these basic principles of more tolerance for other people, just remember, tolerance doesn't mean endorsement. You know, I happen to think, for instance, that the drug war is totally useless. And I think it's been used to abuse our liberties and all, but I also think that drugs are very bad. But I also believe that if people make those decisions, well, when you do this because somebody might misuse the drugs, then all of a sudden we have this argument about using medicinal marijuana. Then we have courts, the Supreme Court comes up and say, oh, we have a right to regulate that under interstate commerce too, because you can't raise marijuana in your backyard to take care of medical problems. So these are the kind of things that people have to make up their own mind. I can have my opinion. I advise everybody. I advise my children and grandchildren that drugs are very dangerous, and we should recognize that. But to make up your own minds about this is your business. You have to suffer consequences. If you look at the consequences of the drug war, it's a disaster. It's a $1 trillion deficit. I think over the 20, 30 years, it's like $3 trillion of debt has accumulated. You know, because of our laws this year, on January 1st, our country ushered in 46,000 new laws. That's too many. What I'd like to do is repeal 46,000 laws. We can do that. We must do that, but we have to restore this confidence that we need. And this is actually where we're making tremendous progress. What we need to do is continue to be energized. We each have a responsibility. If you endorse what I say and understand it, you know, you're going to be in a group, because most people never care about politics. Most people, the majority of people actually don't vote, and the majority who vote decide a day or so before. The fact that you come out and you're interested in this, and if you understand this, actually the burden falls on you to do something about it. You know? And just remember, you don't have to have 51%. You need this irate, tireless minority willing to start price fighting. Reap the benefits from liberty must, like men, undergo the fatigue of supporting it. So it will take a little bit of work, but I don't think it takes sacrifice. It takes work, but not sacrifice. People say, "Oh, to get over this, we have to sacrifice." If I return your liberty to you and give you the chance to work hard and keep what you earn, get the government out of your life, out of your wallet, out of your bedroom, and leave you alone, that's not a sacrifice.
President Paul! 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 President Paul!
We could be a much richer country with less people in prison because we have too many. We have 5% of the population of the world. We have 25% of the prisoners. There's something messed up. I think it's because we have way too many laws. Is what I think the problem is. But you know, the test was there, and we saw the results. And then our country has given up on it. But right now, I think we're on the verge of making a better decision. And this is the reason we should be optimistic, and we should be very positive, and take upon yourself to do something about it. A lot of people, after I speak, they'll come out and say, "What should I do? What should I do?" Do whatever you want to do. And people do different things. Some people run for office. Some people even get elected to office. Some people help other people run for office. Some people are pretty good at earning money, and they donate to other causes. Some people become teachers. Some people actually go into journalism. I'd like to see a lot more freedom lovers go into journalism. Is what I'd like to see. So there is a job for each and every one of us, and one thing with certainty, you know, when an idea's time has come, it can't be stopped. And the ideas of liberty have been around, but they've been lying dormant. I think your generation is awakening a lot of people, not only your generation, but a lot of other people who have been holding back and looking for a little encouragement. But, you know, they say that armies can't stop it. I think they can stop individuals at times, and they can put roadblocks in front of a few politicians. But the ideas they cannot stop. It is the idea. And when the revolution is truly successful, it will not be a partisan issue. It will not be a Republican issue. Just as the problems in Washington is the compromising and this coalition building in Washington of right and left doing the wrong things, when the time comes when there is the coalition of individuals coming together and the revolution is successful, it will be by ideological, and it will be pervasive, and it will spread through the nation. It is already starting, it's growing, and I am convinced that the goal ought to be peace and prosperity, and this is the way we seek peace and prosperity. If we want in our personal lives to seek virtue and excellence, which I think is a pretty good idea, you can't do it with the government telling you what to do. If the government wants to make you virtuous and excellent and wealthy and all this, all they do is undermine our liberties. And this is the reason that the free society is the best society. And it's the only humanitarian society. The opposition who say that we're going to have forced redistribution of wealth and give houses, free houses, and all this, and free food to everybody, they do this and make us look like we're not humanitarian, we don't care about our fellow man. The truth is, if you're a humanitarian, you care about your fellow man, you care about prosperity, you care about correcting the problems of starvation, you have to believe in liberty, the free market, and sound money. That will produce our peace and prosperity that we all desire.
I got sucked in.